looking now at dual suspension. So we've probably spent a little bit of time on suspension on the front of the bike to understand the benefits there in adding a lot of comfort to the front of the bike. So for the lower wrists and arms, you're taking a lot of the jarring impact out of the riding. You're adding a control aspect because the bike is generally front wheels planted on the ground all the time. You're trying to relieve a lot of the jarring and the bounce that comes out of the front of the bike, maybe going over rough terrain, so the customer can stay in control of the bike. Having suspension at the rear of the bike obviously offers the same benefit, but obviously on the rear of the bike as well for the rear wheel. So obviously all the forces that would typically be amplified through the rear wheel up to the saddle, they're trying to take that out with the movement that's available through the rear of the bike. So you can see there, as the rear wheel rides along and hits a bump, the suspension is going to compress under the rider and absorb some of that impact out of the riding. Now, today we're not going to cover dual suspension in a lot of detail because there is a lot of different designs out there and a lot of different travels to suit the riding style, the rider, and also the terrain that they're using. So where those designs come in is the amount of travel that's available. You can get anywhere between 80mm and 270mm of suspension travel, so it's an incredible amount of travel there depending on the usage of the bike. So the lower travel design for just sort of bike path and a little bit of off-road, right up to that 250, 270 is really for smashing downhill at huge speed and hitting big jumps and big obstacles. So really today it's more just about understanding that you can get dual suspension bikes in recreational sport and performance levels depending on the design of the bike and the desired usage of the bike. However, it's really to identify the benefit of dual suspension is extra comfort, extra control. You do have to remind that it does add a little bit of extra weight to the bike, so customers have got to be conscious of that. The other thing that can happen too, depending on the suspension design, is that when you're powering through the bike, you'll get a little bit of flex because the bike is actually bolted together as opposed to being welded together in the rear end of the bike. So where we're talking about that is there's a lot of linkages here that join the bike. The rear end which moves to the front end of the bike, which obviously where it's bolted together, it adds a little bit of flex and movement as opposed to a hardtail frame which is welded. So obviously that's for the customer to weigh up the benefits of saying, is the dual suspension really important to me? Typically customers that are riding longer distances off-road really do appreciate the dual suspension because if you think about the last thing you need when you're riding off-road for a long time is to be fighting the bike to go over all the bumps and rough terrain. So to add in the suspension takes it out so you can ride faster for longer or feel less fatigued when you hop off the bike. So certainly a dual suspension bike is really desirable for someone that's doing a lot of off-road riding and riding a longer distance, or with very high speed in that off-road aspect. So dual suspension provides a really good choice for them, but you do need to get clear on the different types of terrain and riding style the customer's looking for to match the suspension design and travel to their usage to make sure they're getting the most out of it.